Welcome to Stuff You Missed in History Class, a production of iHeartRadio. Hello and happy Friday. I'm Holly Fry.
And I'm Tracy V. Wilson.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Children's Morality Code.
Yeah.
Yuck!
Yeah. I had never heard of this. You sent me the outline. I read the words National Institution for Moral Instruction, and I was like, hey, this sounds like Nazis.
It's pretty awful.
Not quite time for, like, the Nazi party had not developed yet, but something about it immediately. I was like, no, this seems like something bad.
The hardest of passes. Man, this one is so yucky in so many ways. I mean, it starts with the camera hidden in a briefcase. That's creeper behavior.
Yeah, extremely creepy.
The way he became super ableist and into eugenics, super creepy. Yeah. It's really, really, it's just troubling. And it is one of those things, we didn't go into it, but that, when the inquiry started being published in 1928, it got a lot of coverage in the paper. And like one newspaper, there's this huge, with a graphic article about it, about like the findings of kids and how often kids lie and how, you know, kids, there's a quote from the researchers that like they, in one of their experiments, they had this setup where kids were supposed to write down in a journal like the various good acts they did, I think. And it was a voluntary thing. Students didn't have to do it. But the kids that volunteered turned out to kind of be the biggest liars in the class based on their other studies, like that they were just lying in their journals about the good things they had done. And this, of course, became very newsworthy because in the 1920s, before the Depression, people really had time to discuss whether or not kids were worthy of being human beings. It's so weird. It's all so weird.
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, you know, Dewey had it right? He's like, this is just social intelligence, you guys. People will learn these things. That's part of growing up.
Just to be super clear, in case people have forgotten since the episode, the Dewey we're talking about there is not Melville Dewey, creator of the Dewey Decimal System.
No.
We're not saying that guy was right about anything. It's a different Dewey.
I have issues with the Dewey Decimal System.
I have how horrible Melville Dewey was on like my short list for an episode, but I just can't deal with him in this moment.
Yeah. The whole idea that like kids needed these very like you said, it vibes very Nazi-ish. The youth of the future must be perfect kind of ideology. I will say this: a broken clock is right twice a day.
Okay.
And I did find it is listed in that PhD paper that we read as like a footnote that she found in something else. So I didn't include it in the episode because at that point it's many times removed from anything I can look up and verify. But she noted that she found in a thing someone mentioning Fairchild's list of immoral behaviors. And there are a couple of things in this that I was like, well, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So one of them is opposition to proof of another's theories because of jealousy.
Okay.
Sure. Degenerating into a propagandist of an unproved hypothesis instead of being true to the research purpose of discovering truth.
Okay.
That sounds great. We all need to learn that all the time. And then cowardice in supporting a verified generalization because it is unpopular and conflicts with selfish interests. I'm like, yeah, that's all true.
Yeah.
Why are you so messed up?
I also think, like, you know, teaching kids about things like honesty.
Great.
Like, fine. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen. But like that, the list of laws really exemplifies the way that a lot of thinking in our culture and history has been like, if you're able-bodied, you're good.
Yeah.
But if you're not able-bodied, obviously you're bad, and it's your own fault somehow, and you should have not done that. And boy, did I hate reading that.
It's awful. It's awful. The whole idea that kids were basically gonna be put in camps if they weren't moral
Yep,
or
I hated that.
incarcerated
Right,
is
right.
so horrifying. I mean, I, of course, because I'm a self-centered person, because I'm a human, you always project yourself into these scenarios, and I would be like, listen, I was the kid that always had Holly lacks self-control written on every one of my report cards
Mhm,
because I wanted to chitter-chatter with everybody in class.
mhm,
I would be a kid that sat in incarceration in his world because I
mhm.
never learned that lesson. I never learned not to say bad words or yell when people made me angry. Um, I, it's like, it's something that simple that literally would make you considered not worthy of being in society. And I'm like, this also reaches a tipping point. Pretend none of it is even about the incarceration of people that don't pass the morality code. At what point is a code like this invoked to keep people down? Do you know what I mean?
Mhm,
Like, if you have this and kids are doing this every day and they're reciting all of the ways that they're going to adhere to these laws of morality,
mhm,
what happens when that kid comes into a situation that they have not been prepared for, where a person in power is doing something wrong
mhm.
because they have been taught to be loyal and to not complain
Right,
and to like,
right.
nope. That's a big nope-a-lope. It made me so angry. It made me so angry that I was like, we have to talk about this.
Yeah,
It's gonna suck, but we have to talk about it.
yeah.
'Cause, man, yuck. Also, on the Bravo TV edition of this whole thing, we never found out, to the best of my knowledge, who the person was that put up that money.
Yeah, so in addition to being like, "Hey, man, this sounds like Nazis. What's happening?" I went to try to figure out what this organization was because that was not a name I recognized from, the list of historical organizations in my head. And I found this one thing that, like, listed all the members and advisors and stuff like that, and I was like, "Who was this businessman that paid for this, though?" And that was not in there
Nope, I never found it.
anywhere.
Never found it. It's interesting. I know the work of the researchers that did the inquiry that oversaw it, Edward Thorndike, he had been funded in his work, which was similarly trying to like dismantle these ideas or
Mhm.
like show that they're not effective, was funded both by Rockefeller and Carnegie. So I
Yeah.
was like, well, those are the two people I would have suspected of putting up the money. So if they were working against it, who is this mystery person? Like, and we'll never know. Maybe it was one of them. I don't know.
Maybe we will know at some point when somebody's writing a dissertation on some businessman and finds the transaction in their ledger
Right.
somewhere.
Right. The 1916 $5,000, or it might have been earlier, right? Because it might have been
Oh, sure.
allocated before when the thing was announced.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
$20,000 one, like that. I mean, that was a lot of money
Uh-huh.
at the time. So that is a significant transaction.
Yeah.
Oh, I ache to know who it was. I ache. Who would have had a vested interest? Anyway, I could think and theorize for a very long time, but I don't. We may not ever know, or we may find out. I don't know. I'm sure glad that they stopped doing that.
Mhm.
Uh,
One of this week's episodes was on Mary Hunter Austin.
yeah.
who I really thought that I was going to be writing an episode that was about walking in the desert and reading lots of quotes about her beautiful descriptions of the desert landscapes and the desert peoples that she was so in love with. And that was not the episode that we got.
No.
I did not intend this episode as like a counterpoint to Harriet Russell Williams Strong, who we talked about last year.
I was going to ask if she
didn't.
came up in the friction stories about the irrigation issues and water rights.
I did not see Harriet Russell Williams Strong's name mentioned in any of it. But as I was doing the research on Mary Austin, I was like, what? Why does this sound so familiar? We've talked about this on the show. When did we talk about it? And just enough time had passed that I had to go digging to bring to mind what episode that was in. In addition to that dispute, it seems like Mary Austin had some conflicts with people.
Yeah.
We mentioned John Muir at the beginning of the episode. I don't know what their disagreements were, but one of the sources that I used mentioned that there were disagreements, that they butted heads in some way, and I was like, I wish I could find the details about that.
Right.
We talked
Drama.
Yeah. We talked about like being threatened with a lawsuit by H.G. Wells and having a heart attack in the stress of all that. There was also apparently a falling out with Willa Cather.
She just had all the greatest hits of arguments.
Yeah, and I don't think we mentioned Willa Cather at all in the episode, but she met Willa Cather probably sometime in like the 19 teens. They became friends. In 1926, Mary was going to be away to have an abdominal surgery, unrelated, I think, to the breast cancer diagnosis, which I have various questions about what was going on with that, which they're unresolved. I have no answers to the questions about her breast cancer diagnosis, but she was going to be in St. Louis having an abdominal surgery. And Willa Cather was going to be passing through her neighborhood, and she was like, hey, you can stay at my house while I'm away. And Willa Cather said, great. And she wrote part of Death Comes for the Archbishop staying there at Mary Austin's house. And she acknowledged this, I think, in an inscribed book that she gave to Mary later on. But in Earth Horizon, Mary Hunter called Willa Cather's praise of French missionary priests a calamity. And Willa Cather like publicly denied having written any part of any book at Mary Austin's home. And I was like,
drama.
Just having arguments everywhere. I think she may have met Willa Cather at Mabel Dodge Lujan's house. That was the wife of Tony Lujan, who was the person that they had worked with to get permission to take pictures at Taos Pueblo.
Yeah.
Mary Dodge Lujan seems like an incredibly fascinating person to maybe possibly do an episode about one day. She was an heiress and a promoter of the arts, and her home became kind of a gathering place, or their home. They were married. It became a gathering place and a retreat for writers and artists, and that included people like Georgia O'Keeffe and Willa Cather. So she was sort of a central figure in the literature and arts and culture of this part of the U.S.
Yeah, I don't. I know you have no answers, but I'm like, oh, she lived way past the 1909. I guess I'm not dying of breast cancer moment, so I think I'll go to Italy. Like a long time after that.
Yeah, I have absolutely no detail on like what kind of examination she was given when she was told that she had breast cancer. I have no idea what diagnostic tools went into that. Really no sense of what her symptoms were besides this arm pain that had led her to go to the doctor.
Right.
I just have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
About all of that.
Me too, also.
I have a lot of feelings about her daughter, Ruth.
Yeah.
Um, because part of like the time when Mary was trying to parent Ruth with no resources, some of that sounds awful, really awful. I'm not really completely clear on how old Ruth was when Mary would go to work as a teacher and leave her by herself at home.
Right.
Like whether she was of an age that people might think that was okay. It seems like she did not have the ability that she would have needed to like do that safely. So some of this just sounds really terrible. But the judgment that people passed on her for finding other arrangements was also really awful. And
Yeah.
I felt personally, I had personal feelings about that because my mom, her entire career was working with disabled people. She started working with disabled adults in a day program, teaching things like literacy and math and life skills and things like that in like a day program. And most of the adults that she worked with might be able to like live in a group home setting or with family, some kind of situation where they had additional help and additional support. But then she started working with children in a long-term care facility, and the children that she worked with, a lot of them had multiple disabilities. A lot of them had, I mean, not all of them. All of them had multiple disabilities. All of them had very high support needs. And a lot of them also had medical needs where they really needed like 24-hour
Right.
medical care on site. So, like kids that needed breathing support that needed to be suctioned on a regular basis or
Yeah.
had feeding tubes or some kind of stoma on their body, like all kinds of things like that. Um, and sure, there were parents that probably seemed inattentive or callous in that whole situation. There were also a lot of parents where it was like, what was the other option, right? Like this child needs care all the time. This child needs a lot of support all the time. The whole family also needs to have a home and eat and have electricity and all of that.
Yeah.
And so, like, it may not be possible for this child to be cared for at home. There are some ways for people to be cared for at home, but a lot of times those are extraordinarily expensive. They can be really hard to arrange. And sometimes there are just ways to have subsidized care in a residential facility that doesn't exist for somebody trying to stay at home. But people spoke about the parents whose children were living at this facility with a very broad brush and spoke as though everyone was just awful for having to place their child. And sometimes I'm just like, what would the other option be, though? Like,
Right. Take the fact that Ruth was disabled out of it,
mhm.
which is, not to m- erase her or anything, but like, even if Mary had what would be called an easy baby, right? A kid
Mhm.
that like hits all of their developmental marks, isn't especially fussy, seems well adjusted. She did not have a good model of parenthood to work from to begin with.
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
even if she had a child with no disabilities, perfectly, healthy and had just an easy time in the world, I don't know that she would have been equipped with the tools to know how to be a great mom.
Yeah.
Which, like,
Yeah.
especially at this time when it's not like there were a cajillion parenting books, and
Yeah.
particularly not for parenting kids with disabilities,
Right.
where was she gonna learn any of that?
Yeah. Well, and also with her husband not really involved,
Right.
uh,
She's essentially
also,
a
like,
single parent.
yeah, she still would have needed to work to earn enough money to keep them housed and fed. So yeah, there are times in the accounts of that where I was like, wow, this sounds awful. And in this, in this part of the situation, it seems like she did something really messed up. But there are also a lot of times where it seems like she was doing her best with no resources in a society that had no resources, that didn't even consider that there needed to be resources
Right.
for disabled children and their families. None of which I was prepared to be writing an episode about
Surprise.
when I thought we were going to have an episode about walking in the desert.
Surprise.
So yeah. A lot of Mary Hunter Austin's work is in the public domain. Not all of it. Some of it is a little bit too recent to have come into the public domain yet. So there is a lot of it that you can read on places like, archive.org and Project Gutenberg and places like that. I feel like her assertion that she could figure out English and writing on her own and she wanted to spend her college education on something else, that there was some hubris there because it does seem like she struggled to work out things like, craft and style and all of that. One of the reasons it took her a really long time to get longer work published, it wasn't in addition to the fact that she was trying to care for a child. She was having to kind of learn as she went things like structure and form and
Right.
And all of that. I also have only read some of her works. By no means have I tried to do a thorough survey of all of it in the time we have to prepare a podcast. Her almost one book a year for 32 years.
What? You didn't buzz through 30 books real quick?
Well, difficult.
What are you, a quitter? I am working on an episode upcoming about a writer that I love, and even revisiting all of their works is taking some effort and time.
Yeah.
A lot of audiobook action going on.
Yeah. If you want to send us a note about this or any other podcast or history podcast at iHeartRadio.com, whatever is coming up for you on your weekend, I hope it is as good and smooth as possible. If you've got stuff in your life happening right now, I know a lot of us do, stuff that's not great. I hope you're able to take some moments for yourself to take some deep breaths. Maybe get yourself a little treat of some sort. Maybe just sit under a tree where things are starting to turn green and bloom here in the Northern Hemisphere. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere getting ready to look at the oncoming of winter, I hope it's going to be a great winter.
Indeed.
I guess autumn is closer because we're getting just about to spring. We're not exactly to summer yet. Yeah. I just visited my parents and was able to cut some of the earliest blooming flowers in the yard to bring into my mom.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Nice.
We will be back with the Saturday Classic tomorrow and with something brand new on Monday. Stuff You Missed in History Class is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.